Discover the amazing secretary who transformed a millionaire CEO's life in just 30 days. Samantha felt the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her as she glanced at the chaotic piles of paperwork on her desk. The fluorescent lights flickered above her in the architectural firm where she worked, their sterile glow contrasting starkly with her frayed nerves. She was a single mother in her 30s, juggling the demands of her job as an administrative assistant, while her mind raced with thoughts of her ailing mother and her daughter's after-school commitments. The relentless grind beat against her resolve, especially today, with deadlines looming. She braced herself as the voices of her colleagues filled the air, dismissing her as just a secretary as they walked past. Each laughter felt like a pinprick, a daily reminder of the talent and ambition they overlooked. Deep down, unexpressed designs and concepts pulsed through her veins. In her mind's eye, she envisioned stunning buildings, vibrant spaces, creations that resonated with life. But here, she filed papers, while her mother fought a chronic illness, consumed with the reality of bills that piled up faster than her dreams could expand. She had tried to speak up, share her ideas, but her voice always got drowned in the murmurs of her more esteemed colleagues. The fear gnawed at her, relentless and pervasive. What if they were right? What if she was just the secretary forever? Then, abruptly, the atmosphere shifted as billionaire CEO Jake Henderson burst into the office, a gust of tension rushing in with him. The storm outside mirrored his formidable presence. Rumors of his ruthless business acumen twisted like tendrils within her thoughts. He was in trouble, and everyone knew it. Bankruptcy loomed large over the firm with a failed project threatening everything. He needed help, and as their eyes met across the chaos, he didn't see a mere assistant. "Samantha," he commanded, "reorganize my office. We need a temporary fix." With that one sentence, he plunged her into his tornado, a whirlwind of intense pressure. Could she rise to the occasion and prove her worth? Fear anchored her as whispers of "Justice Secretary" echoed in her mind. She hesitated. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The tension rose. As she began to work closely with Jake, her struggles collided with the reality of his privilege. Ideas flowed in bursts, and as Jake listened, she could see the flicker of interest in his eyes, a spark ignited by her innovative concepts. The dance of doubt and determination twisted within her. Just as she began to feel the possibility of respect, whispers of jealousy flowed from her colleagues, forming an undertow she hadn't anticipated. Battling this against the fear of failing, the clock ticked down to a critical board meeting, the weight of potential success crushing in on her. Could she break through? Would Jake finally see her true value? Just as they were on the brink, a muffled crash sounded from the next room, jolting her from her thoughts. The startled faces turned to her and Jake, a hushed silence looming. This sacred moment on the precipice felt like it could unravel everything. As she caught his gaze, anticipation burned in her chest, and the door to her future hung ajar. Would Jake choose to embrace her vision or succumb to the old ways of blinding privilege? The tension danced between them, leaving the answer just out of reach as they waited for the ensuing storm to break. Samantha could feel her heart racing, each thump echoing against the stark walls of her reality. The muffled crash had shattered the tense anticipation, leaving her pulse drumming in her ears as she exchanged a fleeting glance with Jake. He exuded an energy that was both intimidating and invigorating, igniting a fire within her she had long thought extinguished. "Let's go check." Jake's voice cut through the fog of unease. He moved away, and Samantha followed, her instincts kicking in. As they navigated through the winding corridors, she pushed away thoughts of her colleagues' penetrating stares and the self-doubt clawing at her resolve. She trailed closely, observing how he commanded attention even amidst chaos. The way he moved, an unyielding force, ignited a new determination within her. This was her chance to forge a path beyond the identity that suffocated her. Stepping into the adjacent room, she found a disheveled team member picking up a fallen stack of blueprints. Their expressions were a mix of shock and embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, the young man stammered, his eyes darting nervously from Jake to the floor. "Get it together,"
Jake interrupted, the sternness in his tone a reminder of the stakes at play. He turned to Samantha, as if unveiling another layer to their collaboration. Don't let this deter you. Focus on what we can salvage from this and build towards the presentation. In that moment, her nerves began to settle. The intensity of Jake's gaze reaffirmed that he needed her perspective, her ability to think on her feet, to transform chaos into clarity. As the team member righted the prints, Samantha remembered her own vision. She inhaled sharply and stepped forward, her voice suddenly confident. What if we incorporate elements from these designs that reflect each project's core values?
We could create a visual narrative that not only showcases our designs, but also amplifies the firm's philosophy. Jake turned toward her, intrigue dancing in his eyes. That's an angle worth exploring. The affirmation surged through her. She felt emboldened by his approval. Together, they began to piece together a revised strategy, their minds making sweet music against the backdrop of uncertainty. Samantha relished this newfound collaboration, each flicker of inspiration growing bolder than the last. With each moment, she broke further away from the shackles of her prior identity. Moments spent in closed doors, with Jake anchoring projects, discussing strategies, validating her ideas, cultivated a powerful sense of self emerging from within. It was as if layers of a long-forgotten architect were unearthing, revealing the potential she unreservedly embraced. However, the whispers from her colleagues lingered, becoming more vicious with each ascent. They observed her growing confidence and strategized on how to undermine it. Just what does he see in her? She overheard a group mutter behind closed doors. The jibes were sharp, the shadows of jealousy weaving through her days. It wasn't merely the whispers, it was the internal confrontation of her beliefs that truly rattled her. Samantha had to decide how to navigate this treacherous landscape. Should she focus on her ambitions and risk further isolation, or should she seek a fragile truce with her peers, protecting her emotional state at the cost of silencing her voice? The conflicts waged war within her, yet Jake's trust in her capabilities reframed her thinking. With every decision, she felt herself teetering on the precipice of transformation. Then it hit her, a different perspective on her colleagues' reactions. What if she could harness their doubt and transform it into motivation? She envisioned advocating for her own worth in team meetings, presenting ideas with confidence, drawing on her concepts fueled by every ounce of doubt they cast. Perhaps they too could be inspired if she emerged not just as Jake's assistant, but as a valued voice within the firm. With a new resolve, she returned to her desk, ready to draft not just designs, but her own narrative. As she looked at her reflection in the polished surface of her workstation, her destiny cracked open like the blueprints she was ready to mold. Unbeknownst to her, however, a new challenge waited. She sensed it, lurking just beyond the threshold of her ambition. What would happen when Jake's world collided with her reality, and the forces that sought to sabotage her grew bold? Would she be prepared to fight back? The clock was ticking. Her transformation was underway, but the battlefield had only just begun to emerge. Samantha spent the next several days immersed in her work, like a soldier honing her skills before battle.
Each design iteration, every brainstorming session with Jake stoked the flames of her ambition, transforming her once shaky foundation into a steeling resolve. She meticulously crafted her ideas, drawing from a well of freshly discovered creativity, and with every meeting she became bolder. She even began voicing her thoughts first, thrusting herself ahead of the whispers that threatened to drown her out. But even in this burgeoning sense of power, she could feel the swirling tension of her colleagues' disdain, like a storm brewing on the horizon. Anonymous emails circulated, backhanded compliments thrived in whispered corners, and the subtle glances exchanged among her peers carried a weight she could no longer ignore. They were plotting vehemently, and she sensed their growing determination to undermine her increasingly prominent role. As the day of the presentation approached, Samantha scrutinized her every move, determined to craft her message with crystal clarity. The gallery of blueprints lined the walls like soldiers in formation, each representative of a project brimming with potential. Under Jake's guidance, she addressed their strengths, but behind every line she drew, she could feel the prickle of judgment, like a cold breath on the back of her neck. "Remember," Jake said, catching her eye during a rehearsal, "confidence is key. Let your ideas command the room." She nodded, his belief in her buoying her hope. Still, self-doubt whispered incessantly. What if they couldn't see the value she brought? What if instead of admiration, she received contempt? She built herself up, but every query about her legitimacy was a testament to the battle yet to come. Her insatiable drive for validation burrowed deeper, transforming into a predilection for perfection.
Late nights in the office became her routine, fueled by coffee and passion. Yet with each passing hour, a gnawing emptiness cut through her focus. It wasn't just the looming presentation, it was the prospect of facing the very colleagues she wished to impress, but who only seemed hell-bent on tearing her down. On the evening before the presentation, surrounded by drafts and sketches, the weight of insecurities crashed over her like relentless waves. She rarely dismissed what others said, but now kicked against the pricks of each toxic confrontation replaying in her mind. Could she harness their negativity, transform them into inspiration as she had envisioned? The terrifying truth sunk in. She was about to stand among a sea of doubters, armed only with her newfound confidence and ideas. Feeling cornered by the swell of anxiety, she withdrew to the quiet solitude of the rooftop in her building, the city lights blinking defiantly against the darkness. Below her, life buzzed in oblivion. Above her, the stars appeared unwavering. As she closed her eyes, a barrage of questions washed over her. Was she ready to redefine how they saw her, to confront their judgments with her execution?
Could she ascend from Jake's shadow and emerge as a force that could not be dismissed? With a profound determination awakening deep within her, she resolved to face them head-on during the presentation, not as a subordinate, but as a collaborator deserving of equal space at the table. The image of her colleagues crumbled in her mind, reshaping into a challenge rather than a threat. Samantha descended from the rooftop, the cool night air invigorating her spirit as she prepared to draft her final notes. The battle lines were drawn, and for the first time, she viewed her colleagues not as adversaries, but as potential allies waiting to be won over. But as daybreak painted the horizon, shadows of doubt loomed larger than ever. Was she truly ready to face what awaited her in the conference room, where their skepticism loitered like unsheathed swords? The time had come to confront not just them, but the self she was still coming to understand. Would the strength she had cultivated hold in the most pivotal moment of all? The very air seemed charged with possibilities, as her heart raced anew, flickering with both fear and fierce determination. As the early morning sun crept through her apartment window, Samantha jolted awake, a wave of adrenaline crashing over her. The presentation loomed closer, and the realness of her impending challenge clawed at her insides. She quickly dressed, her mind racing with strategies as she recalled Jake's final words from the night before. "Now's your time." Walking into the office was like stepping onto the battlefield. Every familiar face felt like a scrutinizing sentinel, each pair of eyes assessing her with unspoken judgments. The conference room door beckoned, the space within resonating with the weight of her expectations. She took a deep breath, reminding herself of the mountain she had climbed to reach this summit. As she entered, the modern decor of the room echoed her professional aspirations. The sleek table was surrounded by her colleagues, a sea of expressions ranging from curiosity to cold scrutiny. In this moment, she made a deliberate choice to channel her nervous energy into focused clarity. She approached the presentation screen, a flicker of uncertainty flickering in the back of her mind. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite the tremor of her heartbeat. "Today, I am excited to present ideas that I believe can redefine our current approach." With each slide, she animatedly spoke about her designs, energy surging through her as the confidence she'd cultivated wrapped around her like armor. She pointed out how each idea was not just a concept, but a thread that could weave the company's future. The early dismissive reactions she sensed dampened with each insightful slide she delivered. But then came the questions. One colleague, a notorious skeptic, honed in. "Samantha, these concepts seem ambitious. Can we realistically implement them within our current timeline?" A jolt coursed through her. The question, while legitimate, carried a dismissive tone intended to undermine her progress. The silence in the room was palpable, anticipation heavy in the air. Uncertainty scratched at the edges of her confidence, but she had spent far too long in the shadows. "Excellent point," she replied, forcing her voice to steady even as shockwaves of doubt rattled her core. While it may seem challenging, each implementation phase is designed with realistic timelines that accommodate our current capabilities. Moreover, integrating feedback from each team member will be crucial in this collaborative effort. Her response was met with a few surprised glances. Some colleagues began to nod ever so slightly. It sparked a flicker of hope, but she could feel the skepticism lurking like a phantom, ready to spring. "Let's discuss cost implications," another voice interjected, sharper than the first. Samantha's heart thumped in protest, an internal battle raging as she decided how to respond. Did she succumb to the instinct to defend herself, or did she seize this opportunity to showcase her research, demonstrating she was equipped for this role?
Her thoughts shifted into overdrive. The lingering doubts began to crystallize into a resolve to articulate that each projected cost stemmed from thorough examination. Understanding the investment is critical, she said, meeting the eyes of her challengers. I'm prepared to outline projected outcomes alongside the expenditures. As she continued, Samantha felt the shift in the room's energy. Questions became dialogues. Her peers were not just adversaries, but participants in a collaborative process. They were starting to engage, their initial resistance cracking as they processed her messages. When she concluded, a tentative applause broke the silence. Her heart raced, both from exhilaration and disbelief. Had they seen her? Had she finally not only been heard but understood? Yet none of this momentum felt complete. There lingered the undeniable tension of those who still stood steadfast against her newfound confidence. One encounter in particular gnawed at her, an unresolved thread she needed to confront, one individual who represented the old doubts. After the meeting, as chatter filled the halls, she caught sight of that same colleague, eyes like daggers regarding her in the aftermath of the presentation. It was now or never. Would she confront this adversary directly? Emboldened by the room's reactions, she approached him, heart pounding with the weight of rejection, yet buoyed by success. "Can we take a minute to talk?" she asked, a mix of determination and trepidation fueling her stride. As he assessed her with a skepticism that felt like a challenge, she braced herself for the confrontation that could either reinforce her standing or unravel everything she had fought for.
With the stakes higher than ever, Samantha faced the prospect of claiming her space, but the encounter continued to stir the very doubts she sought to eradicate. Would she emerge from this exchange as a victor, or would the cracks in her burgeoning confidence begin to show again? In that moment, the true test of her evolving identity loomed just a breath away. "Can we take a minute to talk?" Samantha's words hung in the air, wrapped in an anticipation that shadowed her hopes. She could feel her pulse quickening under the gaze of her colleague, Mark, a revered figure in the company known for his razor-sharp critiques. His skepticism was evident, the very essence of doubt embodied in his posture as he leaned slightly back, arms crossed. Mark regarded her for a moment that felt like eternity, his sharp eyes scanning her face for any signs of uncertainty. The silence amplified the weight of his judgment, and she couldn't help but question if she had overstepped. Had she really earned the right to confront him? "Sure. What's on your mind?" he replied, his tone flat, yet laced with a hint of bemusement. As she settled into a corner of the break room, the walls that had felt so confining moments ago now seemed to close in, allowing her insecurities to surface. Seeking to fortify her resolve, she took a deep breath, centering her resolve on the task ahead. "I wanted to talk about the feedback you gave during the presentation," she began, each word punctuated by her racing thoughts. "I sensed your concerns, and I genuinely want to address them. These ideas mean a lot to me, and to the direction of our team." Mark's eyebrows shot up, incredulity rippling across his expression. "You are aware these concepts aren't exactly ready for prime time, right? This is a serious business we're running, not an art project." She felt her body tense, every muscle taut, teetering on the edge of defensiveness. Yet beneath the frustration, she found clarity, a blurring line between modesty and awareness of her worth. "Believe me," she continued, forcing control over her rising emotions, "I understand the gravity of what we do here. That's why I'm invested in these ideas. They're not whims. They're strategies born from what I've observed over the last few months." Mark's expression softened for a fraction of a second, perhaps intrigued by her conviction. "Okay, let's say the ideas are worthy of discussion. What makes you think we can pivot so drastically without acknowledgement of our limitations?" This was it, the moment to stand her ground. Samantha's heart thudded, a counter-rhythm to the doubt attempting to creep back in. "Because stagnation is our greatest limitation. If we don't challenge ourselves to innovate, we risk being left behind. Every successful company evolves, Mark. We can't shy away from potential just because it feels daunting." As she spoke, realization washed over her like a warm tide, pushing her forward. She was not just defending her vision, she was asserting her place among equals. Mark's sustained scrutiny began to lift, his analytical demeanor softened by her resolve. "You come off as more aggressive than usual, Samantha," he said, a slight grin breaking the tension. "I had always thought you were more reticent. I respect that you've stepped up to defend your presentation." His words ignited a flicker of triumph within her. She was being seen, not as a mere proponent of ideas, but as a contender worthy of conversation. While she still felt the shadows of initial resistance, the dialogue between them had shifted to one of mutual respect. "I appreciate that," she said, emboldened by his acknowledgement. I've realized I can't wait for the confidence to come to me. I have to seize it. Conversation shifted effortlessly, moving to strategies for addressing his concerns and tailoring her approach to include further input. By the end of their discussion, they had reached an understanding, the connection between constructive criticism and innovation drawn tightly together. However, as Samantha exited the break room, relief washed over her, mingling with the remnants of anxiety. Had this encounter reinforced her standing, or would it merely mask deeper doubts she couldn't escape? She shared a moment with herself, wondering if this newfound confidence could withstand future storms. Feeling invigorated, she headed to her desk, excited to strategize her next steps. But in the back of her mind loomed reminders of those who still opposed her. Just as she reached her workstation, a notification pinged, an invitation to a leadership meeting, and her instinct screamed that another challenge awaited. The moment of revelation about where she stood was now overshadowed by the uncertainty of how she would navigate this new battleground. Would she rise to the occasion again, or was this turning point merely a facade? Samantha inhaled deeply, standing at the precipice of her own development once more, questioning if she was ready to face the real test that had just emerged. The stakes felt impossibly higher. What were the opponents waiting in those meetings, and did they hold the power to define her trajectory? The leadership meeting loomed on the horizon like an approaching storm, and Samantha felt the weight of expectations settle heavily upon her shoulders. She took a moment to glance around the office. Colleagues were immersed in their tasks, their faces a mixture of concentration and monotony. Samantha's heart raced as she positioned herself before her computer, fingers lightly poised above the keyboard. She opened the agenda for the meeting, scanning through the topics that would be discussed. It felt daunting, yet she recognized this as a critical moment in her professional evolution. She reminded herself that dialogue inspired change, and within her, the urge to contribute was growing stronger.
But the nagging doubts, those persistent intruders, whispered through the corridors of her mind. Were her ideas merely dreams? Would they be welcomed or dismissed? The words of Mark echoed, reverberating in her thoughts. More aggressive than usual. Did this newfound assertiveness mark her as a contender or an outsider in the boardroom? With a steely resolve, she pushed the doubts aside. Today was not just a chance to support her ideas, but to step into the arena boldly. She began drafting potential talking points, her thoughts flowing onto the page. Strategies to inspire innovation, ways to confront the team's complacency, and evidence to support her proposals. Each point was fuel for the fire igniting within her. As she worked, a growing sense of clarity emerged. This was not merely a meeting, it was an opportunity, an arena where she could advocate for her vision. She recalled the reluctance she once wore like a shroud, and that sadness pushed her forward. She was determined not to return to that place. Her phone buzzed, pulling her back into the present. A message from a familiar name, Jenna, her closest ally at work. "Are you ready for today? I'll be cheering you on." Just seeing those words transported her to a space of warmth, reminding her of the support she had behind her. Fueled by that sense of camaraderie, Samantha decided to reach out to others for insights and questions they had about the upcoming discussions. This was a shift, engaging with peers in a way she hadn't before. Eager to bolster her credibility, she arranged to meet with a few colleagues for coffee, picking their brains and presenting her ideas informally to gauge their reactions. Every conversation illuminated new perspectives and challenges. Each interaction softened her edges and sharpened her focus. Before she knew it, the hour had come. Samantha found herself seated at the long conference table, the anticipation thickening the air. The executives filed in, their presence casting shadows across the polished surface. She felt a familiar stir of anxiety, but this time it was tempered by preparation and subtle confidence. As the meeting commenced, she couldn't help but observe the dynamics at play, where traditional hierarchies hinted at power plays and veiled disdain. Each voice was an instrument wielded to create influence, and she decided that silence was not an option today. When it was her turn to speak, she stood, her back straightened, and addressed the room. Her voice rang out with intention, her pulse steady. She began to present her strategy, weaving in insights she had gathered from her colleagues. Every word articulated a vision she had crafted, and she pushed herself to elaborate on ideas she once hesitated to share. Gradually, she caught glimpses at heads nodding in acknowledgement, and even sparkles of curiosity lightening some of the stoic faces around the table. There was a recognisance forming, a potential bridge being built.
Yet, in the midst of her unfolding triumph, a more seasoned voice cut through, the head of the department, someone she admired deeply, but also feared. "Interesting feedback, Samantha, but don't you think your approach may be too ambitious?" The challenge bubbled in the air,
a stark reminder of the opponents she hadn't fully prepared for. Taking a deep breath, she prepared to respond. The moment could make or break her. The risk of failure hung palpably in the air. Would she fold under pressure, or could this be the moment that would truly define her trajectory? The stakes were higher than ever. She had to stand firm or risk retreating back into obscurity. And so, with steely determination, she looked him in the eye, ready to pivot her strategy. Would her bold new persona endure this trial? The response she crafted could shift everything. Samantha's heartbeat drummed in her ears as she steadied herself. She had anticipated objections, but this strike from a seasoned executive felt like a forceful gale against her fragile sails. Too ambitious? She repeated internally. Wasn't ambition the very spark that drove innovation? She tightened her grip on the table, determined to reframe his skepticism into a compelling argument. Ambitious, yes, but that very ambition is precisely what's needed for our team to evolve, she replied, her voice resonating with unexpected firmness. The room shifted slightly, heads tilting as if captivated by her newfound fervor. The market demands innovation, and if we continue to play it safe, we risk stagnation. In fact, this strategy is not just about reaching for more. It's about ensuring our survival in a competitive landscape. She saw frowns morphing into thoughtful expressions, and a small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. The tide might be turning, yet she knew one response wasn't enough. She had to deliver value to reinforce her position. Let me walk you through some successful case studies, she continued, pacing a little without losing her composure. Each example was a carefully chosen stepping stone to dismantle the skepticism surrounding her proposition. The analytical side of her mind whirred, rehearsing the details she had meticulously prepared. Samantha felt her confidence swell as she detailed each case, aligning the successes with her strategic vision. She could see it in their eyes, the murmurs of interest circulating, certainty creep into her voice, and fear recede to the background. With each statistic she shared, she was presenting not just data, but a vision for an exciting path forward. Yet, lurking beneath her initial triumph, a deeper concern stirred. What if they consider this a desperate reach, she thought. What if the ambition I champion becomes an accusation instead? But the fire within her burned brighter. It was a risk she had to embrace. There was no room for half measures. As the session progressed, feedback flowed both ways.
Questions arose, challenging her conclusions while also acknowledging the potential. She felt alive in this exchange, each question a volley that she eagerly caught. Samantha was engaging with her colleagues in ways she had never experienced. There was a rich, communal air that invigorated her ideas. But then, just as she was feeling bold, another voice pierced the atmosphere. Mark, the same colleague whose words lingered in her thoughts since the meeting. Samantha, I admire how you've taken the initiative, but courage can often blind ambition. How do we deal with the operational pressures? This wasn't just a challenge, it was a test. She felt the air condense around her as all eyes turned toward her. She had to navigate this moment carefully. Was there a kernel of truth in his critique? Operational pressures were real, and if she misstepped, she could lose the respect she had fought so hard to earn. Understanding those pressures is crucial, Samantha began, breathing deeply to ground herself. The operational aspects often impede innovation, but if we don't explore new pathways, we won't just stay stagnant, we'll fall behind our competitors. It's a delicate balance, and we have to be strategic about it. She extended her hands, palms up, inviting collaboration. Suddenly, the room felt less intimidating. She could see her colleagues leaning forward, noting her passion, nodding in agreement with her perspective. This could be her moment. As the debate sparked and flowed between her and her colleagues, Samantha felt a shift within herself. This emerging confidence was intoxicating. She was no longer just a participant in the discussion, but the architect of change. But in the back of her mind, a question lingered. Had she truly earned this newfound respect, or was it merely an illusion? Was she prepared for what came next if she continued this path? The real trial of her mettle awaited just beyond the conference room. And as the session began to wrap up, her heart raced with anticipation of what was to come, a leadership retreat looming on the horizon. Would she step confidently into that next arena, or would self-doubt rise again like a shadow? The stakes were climbing, and she had to decide if she was ready for the challenge. The moment the meeting concluded, Samantha felt an unexpected rush of adrenaline. Everyone was still buzzing, processing the exchange of ideas that had just taken place. She left the conference room with her colleagues, a mix of exhilaration and anxiety coursing through her veins. There was a shift within her, a sense of purpose that had not been so palpably present before, but uncertainty still clung to her like a shadow. How did she navigate this new terrain?
As she made her way back to her desk, she noticed Mark lingering at the edge of the doorframe, waiting for her. His expression was unreadable, a blend of curiosity and apprehension.
She appreciated the fact he had been forthright with her. It was a welcome departure from the usual pleasantries that masked deeper sentiments. Real conversation, she thought, was where growth began. "Samantha," he said, stepping closer, "your presentation was impressive, truly. But I want to make sure you're prepared for what's to come. The retreat will demand a lot, enough that those ideas will be put to the test." "I'm ready," she asserted, perhaps with more confidence than she felt. She wasn't certain what awaited her, but she'd found her voice in that meeting, and she wasn't about to let it fade. "But maybe it's time we strategize together, especially if we're taking those ideas forward." Mark's brow furrowed, but he nodded slowly. "All right, I agree. We need to align our vision with operational realities before the retreat. Why don't we meet later this week to brainstorm?" "Let's do it," she replied, feeling a spark of enthusiasm. He walked away with a hint of a smile, and she wondered if she had managed to convert one of her most vocal doubters into a collaborator. The rest of the day felt electric, but that evening, as she sat at her kitchen table with a laptop open and notes scattered haphazardly around, the reality of the tasks ahead sunk in. What if this was just a fleeting victory? Could she maintain her momentum? Her mind replayed the words exchanged during the meeting, dissecting every tone, every raised eyebrow. Was her confidence an act, or had she truly transformed as a leader? As the week progressed, she set out to change not just the direction of the project, but also the way she approached her responsibilities. Every moment was now infused with intention. In every meeting, she sought more feedback, invited more voices to share their insights, and encouraged collaboration. She stopped censoring herself, presenting ideas, no matter how raw, trusting that the team might refine them together. That week, she also took the time to connect personally with each of her colleagues, soliciting not just their professional input, but understanding them as individuals. In these conversations, she was surprised at the wealth of experience around her, untapped potential that could elevate their project to new heights. But as the leadership retreat loomed closer, another thought gnawed at her. Was she truly capable of leading a team in turbulent waters? What if her colleagues expected her to have all the answers? The pressure mounted as she prepared her materials for the upcoming presentations, and doubts began to creep back in. Were her strategies solid enough? Were her initiatives then merely a mask for her insecurity? The night before the retreat, she was plagued by a sleepless restlessness. Hours ticked by as she weighed speech notes against her fears. What could she possibly offer that was genuinely transformative? What if Mark and others discovered she was still learning, still evolving? With the dawn, she made a final decision. It was less about the perfection of her ideas and more about the authenticity she could convey. As she dressed, she reminded herself, "I am here to grow, not to present a facade." It was a delicate balance she had to maintain, and she would walk into that retreat embodying both authenticity and ambition. As she arrived early the next morning, the venue buzzed with anticipation. The room was filled with executives, each serious and ready for rigorous discussions. Samantha inhaled deeply as she stepped inside, heart racing with the realization that this was her moment to not just influence her peers, but to challenge the expectations she had imposed on herself. And in that realization, she finally understood. The true test awaited beyond the boardroom. Would she transform not just her project, but the perception of her capabilities? The stakes had been raised, and she was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant confronting her greatest fears head-on. The moment the first session began, Samantha's focus sharpened. She settled into the rhythm of the presentations, carefully noting the reactions of her colleagues. Each nod, each frown, each rumble of murmured agreement was a guide to the dynamics at play. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of this intricate network of thoughts and ideas. Yet as the participants introduced their topics, a creeping sense of inadequacy lingered. Was she measuring up against seasoned leaders? When it was finally her turn to present, she adjusted her posture, inhaled deeply, and stepped forward. The familiar notes were in her hands, but she didn't rely on them entirely. Instead, she chose to speak from her heart, embracing the idea that authenticity often resonates deeper than a meticulously curated speech. Each point she raised captured tense attention, but her gaze flitted to Mark, seeking reassurance. He nodded, and suddenly she felt the weight of expectation shift. As she navigated through her presentation, answering questions with a blend of clarity and vulnerability, she gained energy from the engagement. Each challenging inquiry forced her to dig deeper into her thoughts, revealing layers of insight she hadn't known were there.
questions transformed from obstacles to opportunities, turning the presentation into a genuine dialogue rather than just an exposition. After her session concluded, Mark approached with a look of approval that ignited a spark of pride within her. "That was not just good, it was real," he remarked, and for the first time she allowed herself to bask in the moment. Was it possible that her initial fears had been unfounded? Emboldened by this interaction, she took the initiative to lead a workshop later in the day, inviting others to share ideas on overcoming challenges they had faced in past projects. With each contribution, Samantha weaved the perspectives together, facilitating a conversation that fostered collective intelligence.
Her leadership style shifted, evolving from merely presenting solutions to curating a space where everyone felt empowered to contribute. But as dusk drew near and the sessions wound down, self-doubt nudged its way back into the forefront of her mind. Was she simply a facilitator, making others shine? Or had she truly carved out her own place in this leadership tableau? The thought plagued her as she prepared for the final day of the retreat. That night she reflected on her journey. Each misstep had built her, layer by layer, reinforcing a backbone she didn't know was growing. She began to realize that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a potent strength. It was in that honest recognition that she understood the responsibility she now carried, to nurture not only her growth, but also the growth of those around her. The next morning, invigorated by her reflections, she took a moment to center herself before entering the meeting room one last time. As colleagues gathered, Samantha made a bold choice to open the floor not with her ideas, but by asking each person what they believed the most pressing focus should be moving forward. The response was overwhelming. Ideas brimmed over, and the team began collaborating in earnest, energized by the sense of shared ownership. Samantha felt her doubts recede as she realized she was indeed able to inspire this collective momentum. However, just as she began to relish her role within the team, Mark interrupted her thought, stating, "I think we need to address the elephant in the room. The project goals were not met last quarter. How can we turn this around?" The challenge hung in the air, pulling the conversation toward potential pitfalls. Samantha sensed a shift in dynamics, the weight of expectations settling back upon her shoulders. Could she truly navigate this turning point and maintain the trust she had just begun to cultivate? The question echoed in her mind, forcing her to confront an uncomfortable reality. Delivering on promises would require more than just passion. It demanded strategic insight and resolution against rising pressures. Samantha squared her shoulders, ready to face this new challenge head-on. As she prepared to respond, she realized this was not just about the project. It was about her evolution as a leader, and the moment of truth was upon her. Would she rise to the occasion, or falter as the stakes were raised once more? Standing before her colleagues, the weight of expectations settled heavily on Samantha's shoulders. The room buzzed with murmurs, the air thick with anticipation and trepidation. The question Mark had raised hung like a heavy fog over the discussion. She could feel the eyes of her peers on her, each gaze a reminder of how far she had come from being just a secretary. Taking a deep breath, Samantha drew strength from the power she had rediscovered within herself.
The journey had been arduous, and the turmoil she faced was now an opportunity to demonstrate her growth. Our project goals may not have been met last quarter, but we have a chance not only to reassess, but to redefine our approach, she asserted, her voice firm yet inviting. The room quieted, and she could feel the shift in energy as her colleagues leaned in, curious about her proposition. Samantha began to connect the dots, drawing on the valuable insights shared during the retreat. Let's analyze why we fell short. Were the deadlines too tight, and were resources properly allocated? By dissecting our previous challenges, we can create a clear action plan and set achievable benchmarks. Mark nodded, and so did several others, intrigued by her approach. As she spoke, the clarity of her vision emerged, revealing her growing understanding of the complexities at play. She wasn't simply echoing their frustrations, she was forging a path forward. The dialogue continued, a rich exchange infused with collaboration. As ideas sparked and flourished, Samantha felt the validation she had long sought. No longer was she a passive participant. Instead, she was taking the reins, leading her team through challenging waters. Each contribution fortified her role. The doubt that had once followed her melted away. However, it took a deliberate choice to transform her vision into action. Let's divide into task forces to tackle specific challenges. Each of us has unique strengths, and by leveraging our collective expertise, we can address the gaps in our strategy, she proposed, an eager determination igniting her spirit.
Her suggestion resonated, accelerating the momentum in the room. Colleagues began to voice their willingness to take ownership over different aspects of the project. The voices that had once criticized now offered solutions, aligning themselves alongside her, a profound realization. She had cultivated respect through authentic engagement. As the discussion reached a crescendo, Samantha felt a sense of pride swelling within her. This was not merely about reclaiming her position, it was about reshaping perceptions. She had turned her vulnerability into a vehicle for collaboration, affirming her rightful place at the table. Here she was no longer just the assistant, but a valued contributor to the organization's future. Looking around the room, her peers energized and engaging, Samantha recognized the profound transformation that had taken place over the last weeks. She stood tall, embodying the essence of a leader, driven not merely by ambition, but by a commitment to inclusivity and exploration. The meeting concluded with a sense of unity, a tangible excitement surrounding their collective mission. As colleagues filtered out, Mark approached her once more, this time with a look of genuine respect. "You've really stepped up, Samantha. I see the transformation, and it's inspiring," he confessed.
Her heart soared. His acknowledgement solidified what she had fought so tirelessly to achieve. Later that evening, as she reflected on the day's events, Samantha marveled at her journey. The doubts, the fears, the relentless struggle, it all coalesced into an undeniable truth. She had conquered her past limitations. She was no longer just a secretary. She had emerged as a vital architect of her career. The night unfurled, a peaceful tranquility settling over her. As she looked at the blueprints of her aspirations laid out before her, she understood that this was only the beginning. She was ready to navigate new heights and transform challenges into stepping stones. The moment had arrived for her to realize her dreams, manifesting her vision into reality. With unyielding clarity and solid confidence, Samantha had proven not only to herself, but to her peers that she was ready to lead. Now was the time for you to join in on this remarkable journey of transformation. Subscribe immediately to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Comment your reactions and theories about this incredible conclusion, and don't forget to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful narrative. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to act.